All right, good afternoon. Welcome back here to Trader Minute. Great to have you aboard. I'm on just a little bit early here as I wanted to go out and take a look at something that I was asked about last week and, kind of add a little extra insight to it and, maybe give you something to kind of help navigate, some of the charts that you're seeing out there right now and maybe more specifically be able to understand, okay, what, odds in my favor, odds not in my favor, when do I start to get in, when do I start to get out, and I'll show you some of the things that I've done over the last year, which I've talked each one of these I've talked about on video, but I'll show you some of the methodology behind them in terms of overbought and oversold. Now, before we do that, the challenge, there's no new trigger on the board right now. We won't have the final for about 30 minutes here. That said, the only real potential on the list is Vulcan Materials. This was on the list yesterday as far as an upside crossover. Ultimately, it didn't trigger. The consolidation risk on it's fairly high. The amount of movement the option needs is pretty high, but we could still go out and trade it. And it's not that bad that I couldn't go trade it, but we'll see if it signals here and go from there. But I will run the scan just before I hop off video and take a look at that. As far as the 3-7 crossovers go, the upside crossovers, we're looking at Ford, Procter & Gamble, Vulcan Materials. Procter does have a chance to trigger. I'm not expecting it to, but we could see it by the close here. Consolidation risk on it's still fairly high, and then Ford here. Does have a 3-7 upside crossover. I do not expect this to come close to triggering with the consolidation risk where it is there on that. General Motors, you'll notice it's kind of been going in an opposite direction here as Ford. So very interesting divergence that's kind of set up in these two stocks over the course of this week. As far as downside scans go, the only stock that was on the downside earlier was Boeing. And then right now, Boeing is now off of that list, and then Nike's on the list. But neither Boeing nor Nike have any chance of triggering here, both with very high consolidation risk components there. All right, so, as I mentioned earlier this morning, we've had, 6 triggers here in a week. That's, ahead of the pace that I want to see or that is expected. But that said, we haven't been able to trade each one of these triggers. That's not too unexpected, given the time of year that we're in, going into earnings season. But we'll next trigger we'll look to react to it and go for it. So anyway, just because there's not a challenge trigger doesn't mean there aren't trades out there, right? And one thing to kind of keep in mind, the challenge is not looking for what's this stock going to do tomorrow and what is it going to do in the next hour, or what stocks are going to go up next and what stocks are going to go down next. It is looking for probability of trend, right? And when looking from an investment standpoint, or even from a trade standpoint, you can stare at a chart till you're blue in the face. You can add every single indicator on there. You can say, well, you know what? Chances are it's going to go this way. I'm going to make that trade. And then, you wake up tomorrow and boom, something happens, right? And it goes against you. And you say, well, what did I miss? Well, you may not have missed anything, right? Except for the understanding that there is a variability that happens out there in the markets. And it is something that has always existed. It is something that's very normal and something that will likely always exist. We won't have markets without it. But when it comes to trading, oftentimes markets will get into positions of overbought or oversold. And these are very common terms for traders or investors to use, this kind of idea of overbought or oversold. And the natural inclination is to say, well, right now the market's overbought. And so what's the assumption that people make, right? Overbought, they don't hear the word overbought. They hear the word it has to go down, right? They hear this kind of, oh, that means it's got to go down. Oh, that means, next leg is down. And when they hear oversold, ooh, okay, I got to buy because it's probably going up. But historically, that's not the case, right? In fact, stocks can stay overbought for a very long period of time. They can stay oversold for a very long period of time. And oftentimes, the biggest down moves come on stocks that are already oversold, and the biggest up moves come on stocks that are already overbought. Now, when talking about overbought and oversold, we do have to look at the time period. Because something that may be overbought in one time period may be oversold in another. Something that's, nothing in one time period, maybe it'll be overbought in another time period. When it comes to overbought, oversold, stocks constantly go in and out of positions where they are considered overbought and oversold based on various time periods. Okay, minute charts will go through overbought, oversold a lot quicker than monthly charts, obviously, but you can have a monthly overbought chart and a minute oversold chart. Right, and so overbought, oversold, how do we apply them? How do we go for them? And I'm just going to show you how I look at it, and I'm going to take a look at it from an investment standpoint and kind of show you where I'll apply the trade standpoint to it. But when it comes to overbought and oversold, a daily chart to me is one of the worst charts you can look at. It is one of the more meaningless charts. It's one where if you're looking at overbought, oversold, 5-minute charts are pretty good. Even 1-hour charts are pretty good. Weekly charts are fantastic, right? Those are my favorite time periods, weekly, hourly, and 5-minute, in terms of looking at overbought and oversold. When it comes to a daily chart, do I look at it? Sure. How much do I trust it? Well, if it confirms what I'm seeing on my weekly or what I'm seeing on my hourly, maybe. But I rarely will make a decision on a trade or an investment based on overbought or oversold on a daily chart. Okay. That said, what indicators are we going to use to look at overbought and oversold? Well, my 3 favorite, and you've seen me talk about these before, and let's just clear out all of our indicators here. And we'll pop on my 3 favorite, oscillators is kind of what you would refer to these as if you're looking at them in terms of overbought and oversold. And something like a rate of change, not necessarily an oscillator, but I like using it as such. Money flow index, not necessarily an oscillator, but I like using it as such. Okay, and I'm just going to use the normal time periods on these. But here we go. With it, and just like any indicator, they give a scale all the way over here on the right hand side, and high tends to mean overbought, low tends to mean oversold. Rate of change in a similar position, MFI similar, above 80 it's overbought, below 20 it's oversold. Okay. When it comes to overbought, stocks have a greater tendency to be overbought and stay overbought for a long period of time than they do to stay oversold for a long period of time. Oversold, you tend to see bigger snapback reactions. You tend to see bigger rallies, right? What do I mean by that? Well, when we're talking about oversold action, right, a stock going down and it hits oversold, do you normally see the stock just flatten out from there? Occasionally you see it, but the norm is for a bing, a big, hard, sharp bounce. When you see stocks that have been climbing and they're overbought, do you ever really see them go, boom? It happens, right? We can go look at a bunch of charts where that happens, but the norm is they just kind of flatten out. So if I am looking, right, if I'm looking from an entry standpoint, I'm a little more willing to buy oversold, right, than I am willing to short overbought. Overbought, I just look at it as, hey, time to start trimming my position. Oversold, time to start building my position, but I may need to be a little more aggressive. Okay? And, like I said, weekly charts, I just don't really care about, daily charts, I don't really care about. Weekly charts, to me, are a lot more telling in terms of what they mean. So let's start with the CCI. Okay? This is the commodity channel index. This is going to show extremes, right? And that's what I like it for, some real extreme levels. And when it gets oversold to a massive extreme, something below minus 200, that's very abnormal, and that tells me, okay, things are unbalanced. A big snapback could be in play, right? And that's what we tend to see. When we hit above 250, we kind of have the opposite, right? A little abnormal, big snapback could be in play, to the downside. But most of the time when it comes to the CCI, it's telling us nothing. 120 doesn't mean anything, right? It absolutely means nothing. Yes, some will say, well, it's overbought. Sure. But to a degree where you can say what's going to happen next, or say, hey, you know what, the chances of things going down are greater, or the chances of going up are greater. No. So it's not helping me. It's not giving me anything, right? And what am I looking for? I'm looking for it to give me something. So I want to see it above 250 if I'm looking on the downside. I want to see it below 250 if I'm looking on the upside. And those are areas where it tells me something. And the majority of the time, the CCI tells me nothing, right? The CCI is a much better indicator on an hourly basis or on a 5-minute basis. In fact, it's one of my favorite when it comes to those time periods. And I look for the same things. A rate of change isn't so much a level thing, right? A rate of change talks about or analyzes the pace of movement in the stock in question and says, okay, is this pace of movement greater than or less than normal, right? For the S&P, what tends to happen? Over the last 3 years, we tend to see these moves up to about 10 on the rate of change. And that's kind of where the market fizzles out for a short period of time. Just up here around this 10 area, we saw an overshot, here last year at the beginning of the year. But, here in October, we saw a little market pullback, at that level, and we're up here at this 10 level, right? And, we could kind of see something fairly consistent, that the market gets this, pace of movement in it, the buyers kind of flush in, but at this kind of rate of pace of change, they start to fizzle out. They start to fizzle out. On the downside, minus 10 is an area that I like to look at. And, on the downside, things tend to overshoot a little bit more. But, we're nowhere near oversold. And we're starting to hit this kind of, area where, it could keep going higher. But things tend not to go too much higher in the short run from these. For the short run, again, we're talking about a weekly chart. And so how do I look at it? I look at it and say, well, I'm not willing to just go buy anything and expect it to go up. I need to be very selective, right? I need to be very, very selective here. And to just go buy the overall market, may not be the best strategy once we start hitting into this level, right? Now, my favorite overbought, oversold indicator is the MFI, the money flow index, when it comes to a weekly chart. Why? Well, it shows these overbought positions, and this takes into account dollar flows or actual volume in the market, which is a little bit different. And what we tend to see is that when it goes below 20, it tends to see a nice little bounce. When it goes above 80, we tend to see some market pullback. Okay, not always, right? Not always, but right now, where is it at? It's still below 80, right? What's that tell me? It tells me I don't have an overbought position here just yet in the actual market to look at and say, man, you know what? I need to start establishing some hefty short positions here with it. All right. So this is kind of what I like to use, not necessarily for the market, but individual stocks to say, all right, I really like this stock. It's now oversold. Where do I start building? Or I really like this and it's overbought. I need to start trimming, right? Let's go take a look at gold, because this is one we talked about a lot last year, and talked about it in the May time period here with gold, and that I was a buyer of gold. Now, I didn't buy gold because gold was oversold, right? In fact, it wasn't oversold at all. It made a really big jump, pushed up here into the above 80 on the MFI, pushed above 250 on the CCI in late June, early July, and had made this very nice move right here. And right in here, I got on video and said I'm exiting some of my gold position. I used that overbought condition to to pull on out and to say I need to I need to kind of move on from it, right? And I missed some rally. Right? And I know that's not acceptable for some traders. Some traders, investors, they get mad at themselves if they miss a little bit, right? And they always think, I got to get out on the top or I got to get in at the bottom. But that's not realistic, right? At all. But I know, okay, this is where I'm willing to say, in the short run, I want some off. Now, bullish enough in gold that, I don't really want to be all out. But in this time period, I did get all out, all right? Then we saw gold shoot up, and I wasn't willing to get back in, right? At this point, I look at it and I say, fine. It could keep going up, and I never get a chance again. But is that realistic? No. I'll get another chance, right? It's not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be next week. But we then see gold pull on back. Take a look at what happens to the overbought, oversold. It never becomes oversold. Right? Never becomes oversold. But I'm bullish enough on gold that I don't need it to be oversold. I start seeing some indications come in. In fact, we played it for the challenges. We had a couple signals come in. But even then, I talked about I'm buying gold. I'm buying it. Yes, I have a challenge position, but I'm buying the GLD, for what's coming here. Right? And it's not a play on the market. It's not a bet the market's going to go down big. In fact, the market could keep going up while gold goes up. Right? And gold made a really nice move. And look at what happened in the oscillators. Right? CCI gets up here above 200. Right? The rate of change, no, it's not overbought. The MFI, it's not overbought. But as I said earlier this week, I took a big position of my GLD off. Okay, you know what? I'm looking to get back in. I'm looking to, I'm not 100% out, but I'm looking to put money into play. So what do I want to see? I want to see it come out of some overbought, condition here. I know that it could just continue to zoom on up, and I never get a chance. But I'm much more willing to play it with these oscillators than I am to try to question myself and go, well, what's it going to do tomorrow? What's it going to do next week? Am I at the top? And kind of get exhausted with some of those, questions in my own mind, right? And all of us as traders, we do that. As investors, we do that, right? So that's, that's GLD. Right, let's take a look at Starbucks. I did a video on Starbucks back when it hit the 200-day moving average, which was right back here last year. And Starbucks came off the 200-day moving average on the daily chart, and I did a video on it and everything else. But take a look at the the rate of change here. Look at where it went, minus 15. That has been a nice little bounce area for Starbucks over the last 3 years, right? 2 years. Since Starbucks breakout, that has been a decent area to kind of look and say, all right, this is oversold. So this was the biggest pullback, the most severe pullback Starbucks had since it made this nice run. Okay, great. I know that things correct and then, move on back. We get into this oversold. Now I'm willing to start putting on a position, right? And I did. I started putting on a position, and I've added to it. I don't have a 100% full position yet. And we talked about this stock fundamentally and what I think it's in for this year. I think it has some big upside this year. I don't know where it's going tomorrow, right? I don't care where it goes tomorrow. But it's one where, are my oscillators overbought? Do I need to start pulling it off? No, I don't. Right? I absolutely don't. And I'm still in position build mode. And great. So I know each day when I wake up and I'm looking over, what I have and what I'm looking to buy. Okay, Starbucks, it's still in a position build mode. It's not in, kind of takeoff mode, kind of like gold, hit earlier this week, right? Here's Apple. I'm not in Apple. I don't have any Apple. and it just keeps on going up. Every day, every week, just seems to go up, right? It just keeps going up. I'm not in it from an investor standpoint, and I've made a couple trades personally on it, but nothing too dramatic. But am I interested in getting in? No, I have zero interest in getting in, right? Why? Look at the money flow index. I know. It could just keep going up. The money flow index could just stay up here forever and it never go down, right? That could happen. But that's not the normal. And so while, I have a brother who's in Apple and talks about Apple and is excited about Apple and everything else, and I'm not in it, and I'm going, well, do I get in it? It's an easy decision for me. I'm not very interested. I'm not very interested at all. When it ultimately pulls back, flattens out, or gets into an oversold condition or something like that, I'll take a look at it. But it's not something that I'm going to go and establish a position right here, as it is for me personally too overbought. Here's Netflix. Talked about Netflix last year, and I know it wasn't very popular, that Netflix had this slide, and they slid because of Disney Plus, right? Disney Plus is coming, and that's going to be the death knell for Netflix and all that. And we talked till I was blue in the face about the just insanity of that argument, and that it's not a competition thing. It's a, hey, there is now another streaming program out there for people to cut the cord, which is going to be more Netflix subscribers because they're going to get Netflix and Disney Plus. And that's what we have seen happen. We have seen more cords cut. We have seen subscriber bases grow in both. And crazy. But that was not something that was very popular, right? You turn on CNBC, it's talking about the death of Netflix, everything else, but take a look at how oversold Netflix becomes, right? I wasn't willing to just buy it on the oversold, but once it got into the money flow index oversold, after the CCI oversold, after the rate of change down here, what am I doing? I'm looking at every down day, every pullback on Netflix as a buy opportunity. And the weekly chart makes it look like it was calm and stable. Well, no, it wasn't calm and stable. There were some wild swings. And, I added and took off a couple times. I still have a position on Netflix. I do want to add to it. But, I have not because I just, is it going to dip back below 300? I do have some in reserve if that happens. But you'll see it's not overbought in any way, shape, or form. So nothing that I have to look at and say, well, it's time for me to start trimming. So it's a stock I'm very bullish on. Okay, used last year to enter, and trim a few times, as I played it pretty aggressively. And now kind of what I have in it or what my gains were. And I'm looking to put more into it. But, I'm being a little more selective as, there's some other things that I just have a few concerns about, market-wise, right? But what do I know? I know, okay, Netflix is an overall ad position for me. I'm looking for times to add it. I'm not looking every day and going, oh, man, do I subtract? No, I'm looking to add, right? The last one I'm going to show is Chipotle Mexican Grill, and it's no secret that I am extremely bullish on Chipotle Mexican Grill. We did a lot on Chipotle back here 2017, 2018, showing the massive change in mentality when it came to what the short sellers were able to do with the foodborne illness stuff and, how easy the comparables were. And we talked, it's not going to be a smooth ride, right? There's going to be some big ups and big downs in all of this, but the path of least resistance is significantly higher. And I remember one day I used the term $700. And one of you who likes to banter with me a little bit just said, 700? Are you insane? And I said, maybe. Ask me in a little bit. And, we've seen a clear 700 and then some. And look, this is a stock I can see going to 2,000, okay? It could go to 500 first, but overall, that's my view on it. I think this is a $2,000 stock. Okay. Is it in add mode or subtract mode, right? Well, it's not going to give me very many oversold conditions, right? It gave an oversold condition here in December, but even not a great one, right? So what am I doing with Chipotle? With Chipotle, I'm just trimming the position as it gets into these money flow index overbought. And then as it pulls back, I'm using those pullbacks to add. This is one where I'm kind of like Netflix right now with Chipotle. I don't have a full position in. I do want to be adding, to it. I would like to see just general market pullback or something like that, or even a pullback in the stock first. But overall, it's one where I am significantly lighter exposed in the market right now than normal, and that's why I don't have full positions on some of these. Even though they're in the add mode. But if I'm going and adding, these are where I look. These are where I go and say, all right, I'm bullish fundamentally. We're not overbought. So great. I can run with it. So, market overbought. We can talk about the Teflon market. We could talk about this stock overbought, everything else. But, I'm more interested here than I am in going and buying Apple. And I know someone's going to look and go, well, Apple just keeps going up. Why wouldn't you just go buy Apple and, instead of waiting for Chipotle? Well, it all has to do with your comfort zone, right? All has to do with that comfort zone. And every stock is going to have big periods of wins and big periods of loss. And when things get overbought on a weekly chart, when they get overbought in a very significant way, right? We saw that with Chipotle after this big jump right here. It was just something where I had to take and I had to move on for a little bit. I had to let the charts settle out. Look at that just huge overbought condition that came into play, right? And did I miss some upside? I did, right? It pulled on back and pulled on down. I did not get it right here. I waited. So I did not make as much money as I could have had I held the whole thing. But it was in my comfort zone. And that's for me overbought, oversold. It's about your comfort zone. It's about something that you go and say, hey, you know what? This is something I can work with, right? We can come in, right? We can come in and do a scan, right? So I could come in. Let's see. Do I already have one? I don't think I have one here saved because I do not run this scan very often, and you'll see why. But I could come in and say, all right, let's go a new scan, and I want stocks that let's see. They give me the let's see. They changed the formatting on this. Let's see. Yeah, I don't want that. My apologies. All right, this is how we're going to do it. We're just going to come into here. There we go. And we'll clear out our criteria. But I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to say, look, I'm going to go look for money flow index, right? The MFI. Let's see here. Where do they have that? There it is. All right, so I'm going to look for the money flow index on a weekly period, right? So 0 weeks ago, I want the money flow index to be less than or equal to 20, right? What's that going to tell me? It's going to tell me it's oversold, right? Let's just look at the S&P 500. And so let's just run this scan. Let's see what it gives us. Nothing, right? Nothing. Where the MFI is below 20. So on the S&P, not a whole lot there for it. So let's expand this. Let's just come in here to all U.S. stocks, right? And let's see here. Now we have 122, right? And here we go. These are all the stocks that are below 20 on the MFI. You'll notice a lot of these are ETFs, right? Because there's not a single stock in the S&P 500 that is in that significant oversold position. And I scroll through this list. Is there anything I'm not interested in? No, not at all, right? Here's Shake Shack. Okay, my wife and daughter like that place. All right, let's go take a look. Let's see what that's doing. And is it in a overbought, oversold position on a weekly chart? And here we go. The weekly is below 20. So you can see what that looks like, right? So if I were bullish fundamentally on Shake Shack, if I was looking to build a position in Shake Shack, this would be a area where I would start considering it, right? Now, I have not done any homework on Shake Shack. I don't know what their fundamentals look like. I don't know what their sales look like. So, I'd have to go do all of that and say, okay, you know what? Yeah, I am bullish, or no, I'm not. Just because the MFI is down here doesn't mean I'm going to be a buyer. But I can see, hey, Shake Shack last time, 2017 down here. Okay, interesting. What about the fundamentals here on it? Let me come into Y charts. Let's just kind of see if there's any action here coming in. Wants me to update my payment information. That's what happens when a credit card expires at the end of a year. So let's come in here to Shake Shack, and let's come in here to a fundamental chart. And let's just kind of look at it from a revenue standpoint, right? We'll come in here TTM over the last 10 years. Revenues are continuing to grow, right? So this doesn't seem like a revenue issue. Let's take a look at the price of the stock to sales, right? And go, does it have something from a price to sales ratio here where I can say it's cheap? No, not really, right? So, on the absolute surface, there's nothing that I look at and say, oh, okay. So I'd have to dig in. I'd have to do some homework here, look at what some of the comparables are and whatnot. But it doesn't look like the stock is extremely expensive on a historical basis. Doesn't look like there's too much here. So it might be something I'm interested in. In fact, I'll probably go take a look at it tonight here. But that money flow index below 20. Those are where I start to say, okay, now I'm willing to, I'm bullish, and now I'm willing to start considering. Keep in mind, it won't be always a pretty story, right? It's not going to be this simple, oh, well, I'm just going to turn on CNBC, and every analyst that comes on there is going to be bullish on my stock. No, right? Here's Netflix. Netflix oversold on the MFI, right? You turn on TV, everybody's bearish. Right, everybody's bearish. It's just one of those where it became popular to bash Netflix, and that's oftentimes the case. And a lot of times when the MFI is above 80, you turn on TV and everybody's bullish on that stock, and magically it decides to pull on back. All right, bear with me for 30 seconds here. Let me just run the challenge scan here and see. Vulcan Materials was one that had potential to trigger here, but let's see where it's at. That's a no on Vulcan. Let's see, Procter, no. All right, so no new signal here on the board right now for the challenge. Boeing, if it sells off a little more, we'll have a downside 3-7 crossover, but won't signal. Ford, Procter & Gamble have upside, Vulcan as well, but not signaling there. So I'm going to go into the weekend in cash. And take a look here Monday. A lot of the strength that we saw in the tech sector is starting to wane here today. Apple, it would be very unusual to see Apple end the day red. It has been very green. We see Amazon finally pulling back a little bit. So interesting closeout here to the week. I don't think you can look at it and say, oh, it's mega bearish or anything like that. But jobs report, put a little dose of cold water on the market. But if you really look at where the sell came in, right? The sell came in as the U.S. announced new sanctions on Iran. And Iran, last I saw, hadn't really responded to them. But Iran typically, in the past, they haven't responded to sanction news because, let's face it, for most of them, it doesn't affect them as, they don't come to the U.S. or anything like that. But, there are some things that could ultimately affect it. All right. All right, thanks for hopping on. This video will be posted here as soon as it renders, and so you'll be able to check out the full video here, talking about the overbought, oversold, characteristics here. And we'll talk to you on Monday. Take care.